Aloha! Today is day 26. Wow, this is getting harder. Today is day 26 of the 30-day journey to 30. And I didn't think it was possible, but I'm getting more and more and more and more and more excited. Yes. This is the final countdown. Like, this is it. 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Like, where we are slowly getting there. It is blowing my mind. Um, Another thing is today we are diving into the last of the 7 C's, which is clarity. So far, we've covered character, curiosity, connection, courage, creativity, consciousness. Now we're diving into clarity. And clarity is fantastic because it kind of wraps everything up in a nice shiny bow. It's like bloop, 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 doop, 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 and it's a lovely little present for you to keep working through. So clarity, let's just jump right into clarity. So clarity to me, and in case you haven't noticed, I do say some of the same words consistently. So when I say the 7 C's pretty consistently, those are words that are important to remember. But you might have also noticed that I say that I want you to live an authentic life, a brilliant life, and a life with clarity. So if you heard me say, I want you to live your most authentic life, your most brilliant life, I believe that the way to get there is through clarity. So kind of like going back to what I said before, my entire worldview can be summed up in 2 words, which is know thyself. And if you know thyself, you have that clarity. If you have that clarity, you're going to be living your most authentic and brilliant life. So that's how all of that fits together for me, and sort of my life coaching philosophy. So clarity is important. This is one of the biggest 7 C's. That's why it's at the end, because all of the other ones kind of build up to clarity. So what is clarity? So sometimes the biggest questions that you can ask yourself, like, who am I? What is my purpose? Where can I find fulfillment? All come down to a much smaller question, a very simple question. What do I do today? And because grand visions are pretty easy to scheme up. I'm sure you've thought about, well, I could write a book and I could start a business and I could be a stay-at-home mom and I could travel the world and I could open a sanctuary for dogs and I could open a coffee shop. Like, I'm sure you've thought all of these grand schemes, and if you, for example, if you've thought of opening a coffee shop, you can picture the counter, you can picture the tile colors, you can picture the menu, like you can picture this grand scheme of things in the future. But how do we get there? How do we get there? And so that's what the 7 C's are all about. We have these grand visions, but genuinely, what do we do today to start working towards them? And clarity is the thing that connects the 2 of them. So there are generally 3 things that muck all of that up. If we pause for a second to really think about our dreams, and try to go inward and start trying to plan them out, we'll run into 3 things. We'll run into confusion, distraction, and disorganization. And confusion normally looks like not setting clear priorities because we're not sure where we're going, right? So we want to open up a coffee shop, but do we plan the tile color? Do we order the machines? Do we get an LLC? Like, I don't know what to do, so I don't have priorities. So now I'm confused, which is fair, totally fair. Another thing that happens is, so confusion and then distraction. And this shows up as having a million other things pop up. Like, yes, we have the dream of starting our own coffee shop, but, I could just read this book about starting a coffee shop, and that'd be kind of cool. I could read about Starbucks and how they got famous. I could go to a coffee shop and just drink their coffee. I could go on a date. I could distract myself and Netflix binge. I could take the dog for a walk. I could answer these emails and answer these phone calls. I could call people. I could... a majillion. That's my new favorite word. A majillion. A million bajillion things could pop up. And so we never end up getting there because we're not sure of the path anyways. Like, confusion has already made it certain that we don't know where we're going. And so then it's so much easier to just let distraction pop up. Like, let's just distract ourselves from not knowing what we're doing anyways. And then disorganization, this normally shows up in the other 2, but it's just that that lack of orderly thinking that leads to protective results. So disorganization is not having it all up there and you're not even sure where to start, and so you just kind of it's back there and it's spinning, and so you're just gonna call your mom and take a nap. So confusion and distraction kind of together equals disorganization. Like everything is not working now, and all of this is the opposite of clarity. So what we really want is clarity, and we do that by, excuse me. Oh, by the way, I don't think I mentioned it. The information that I'm getting now is from an article that I found on Chopra. I actually don't know how to pronounce that. I don't think I've ever heard that said out loud. CHOPRA.com, and it is an article by him himself. And he brings up these three main kind of mental processes that mess us up in figuring out how do we get from here to there. How do we start with what do I do today to get to my grand vision? And going back to confusion, distraction, disorganization, he mentions that these are solved by some very simple things. So confusion is solved by getting your priorities straight. So confusion is solved by taking the actual steps to figure out the actual steps. So confusion is saying like, okay, well, clearly walking my dog is not helping. Let me read a book on how to actually open a coffee shop. Like reading a book about Starbucks isn't a book that's actually going to help me open my coffee shop unless it outlines business processes. So distraction, I think I mentioned this one just a tiny bit when I said walking your dog. So distraction is solved by getting better at focusing your attention. It's recognizing that, yes, I could send a majillion emails, but how about I not? How about I not? Because I have a goal and I want to get there. And so let's focus on what really matters. And disorganization is solved by throwing out those things. So once we realize that they're not essential, they're not helping us, they're not important, it's throwing them out. So very, very much, this might sound very similar to the process that we've already talked about with stop, look, listen, act, with awareness, intention, commitment. It's saying, I'm going to start paying attention to what's going on around me. I'm going to get rid of the non-essentials, and I'm going to commit to this process because this is what matters most. And so along those exact same lines, in order to get to clarity, in order to get to the process of figuring out what do I do today to make my life move towards the most authentic and brilliant it can be, is figuring out the confusion, the distraction, and the disorganization. And my favorite part in all of this ramble, is that clarity is actually already inside of you. Clarity is already inside of you. So there's a fantastic analogy. Analogy is the word I'm looking for. There's a fantastic analogy in here that compares clarity kind of to a river. So on the surface of a river, it might be running into rocks. There's lots of waves. It's very chaotic. There's like fish jumping out. There's like things are happening right on the top of this river. This is where a lot of times we spend our life, is the majillion. I really like that word. I'm going to start using that word forever now. Is the majillion phone calls and emails and dog walks and sandwiches to be made, like everything else that gets our attention. So that's the surface level. If you move further down, water's still rushing, fish are still there, like it's still going, but it's slower, it's more steady. And if you move even further inward, it's like the bottom of the ocean. It's still moving. The river is still moving, but it's so still, but it's moving so slowly that it feels still. And I think that's a cool process, is recognizing that that's very much within you. And a lot of times you could probably compare it to here, and like here. You can't see my belly, but it's down there. So our mind is like, blah, 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 and then our heart is like, okay, we can do this. But then your intuition, something that we've been talking about pretty consistently, is down here, and it's consistent. It's there. It's like the bottom of the river. It's not sloggy. It's so still that you can see for miles. That's our intuition. That's where we want to get to, that clarity. So there was a quote in here. I'm trying to find it real quick, trying to scan. So here we go. We've all been taught, in one way or another, that the mind will run amok if it isn't watched and controlled. Like a child, it is easily distracted. An undisciplined mind will run around in all directions, but few people have actually tested whether the mind's nature is so chaotic. We take for granted, looking at our own confusion, that it would be a struggle to turn inner chaos into something more orderly. This is where the world's wisdom traditions offer a valuable secret. They teach that the unsettled mind comes about through only one thing: losing sight of who you really are. You can't be a puppet of outside demands and pressures unless you see yourself as secondary while the world out there is primary. After all, how can you eat, put a roof over your head, raise a family, and so on without plunging into the hard realities of daily existence? The answer lies in finding out who you really are, a conscious agent who can choose at any time to live from the level of the true self. The settled mind, in fact, is the most capable of meeting the day's demands because it is guided from within. Self-awareness dominates, which means that you know who you are and where you're going. You know where you're going. You know where you're going. Suddenly, it turns out that the day contains enough time for you to find fulfillment, which is a timeless quality that is undisturbed by demands, duties, and distractions. So that was kind of a long quote, but the biggest thing that I'm hoping you got from that is recognizing that all of that confusion, the disorganization, the distractions come from not knowing who you are. And if you go back to the practice, if you commit yourself to listening to your intuition, to tapping back into that, to knowing who you are, clarity kind of happens on its own, which is another part that I hope you got from this quote that I just read, this little segment that I read, that a lot of times we feel like we have to control and organize and put everything in order, and like, if only we could just control our mind, if only we could manage time better, then life would make sense. But honestly, that's not how it works. A lot of times the mind, if we just let it settle, if we just take a second instead of being up here in the waves, and we just let our life kind of be here, the answers happen. It happens. It makes more sense. We get reconnected with who we are, and suddenly it turns out that the day contains enough time for you to find fulfillment, which is a timeless quality that is undisturbed by demands, duties, and distractions. And that can be your everyday life. Absolutely. Absolutely. That can be your everyday life, and it comes from clarity. So now that we have I'm not articulating it very well, but I was kind of humored at myself for bringing up the analogy of a river, and we dove into clarity. Need I say more? So clarity and the next three topics that we're going to talk about are more about putting all of the pieces that we've talked about. So the next three things that we're going to discuss, trust, integration, and expansion, are less about new topics and more about putting the topics that we've already discussed together. That's what clarity is. Clarity is allowing yourself to really understand the other concepts that we've already covered, the other 6 of the 7 C's, so that clarity can happen. Okay, so I kind of gave it away already. We're going to be moving into trust, integration, and expansion in our next few posts. I'd love to hear from you. Out of confusion, distraction, disorganization, which one do you think hooks you most? Which one do you think pulls you away from your path? And what are your thoughts on how to get more in tune with the bottom of the river self? So moving from here to here to here. What are your thoughts on, like, how do you best move down here into your intuition? What do you think? What works for you? I'd love to hear, and I will see you here tomorrow when we move into trust. I hope you have an amazing day.